Hi everybody, thank you very much for joining this final session. It's 2:15, so in the interests of sticking to time, we'll kick off. Now this session really is basically a hands-on kind of, I'm gonna try and run it in a question and answer type format, in like a facilitated Q&A. I don't have any PowerPoint slides or anything presented, but one of the dominant questions that was raised in the feedback and also prior to, hence this session, is that there are a lot of teaching scholars who really don't understand where they fit, how it fits, what teaching scholarship is, and a whole bunch of questions about the structure of the university. Many of the people who have been participating in this conference are teaching scholars, and for some that is a new career step, a new career path, and are just engaging into that brave new world of scholarship and scholarly activity. So I've arranged a few of us who will be a virtual panel. However, I can see that there are a number of people on the screen, and I'd like to introduce the panel members firstly. So Tania Signal, who is officially my doppelganger for those of you who don't know us. Tania is, Professor Tania Signal is the chair of our ethics committee at the university. Why are you laughing, Lisa Bricknell? See, I've got everyone on screen. I can see you all.
Sorry, on my screen, Tania is immediately under you, Celeste. And when you said that bit about doppelganger, I just had to crack up.
Yeah. Many a time have we been confused. Many a time. It's joyful, really. So that's right. So that's why Tania has to have her hair purple. It just doesn't work when she does it the light color. But thank you very much. So Tania, welcome. And the other panel member who is participating today is Associate Professor Delma Clifton from our Learning and Teaching Services. So hi Delma, I can see you there. I do notice though that our Pro Vice Chancellor Joshua Pnar is on. So Josh, I can see you there. So please say hi, because we may just call on you to provide some expert advice if we get stuck. Come on, Josh, say hi.
Oh, I want to see your face while you're eating your sandwich. I think that would beat Rayna's shoes any day.
All right, so we know Josh is there. And the other person who was going to be part of this panel, who is going to come in late, is Professor Kate Ames, who I think would is going to contribute. I've got to get my notes up. Sorry, excuse me. Is able to contribute the implementing innovative teaching angle of this session. So what I'm going to do is basically pose a couple of questions. I'll get our panel members to answer those questions, and then have a form of a discussion. But this is interactive. This session is interactive. I'm not expecting huge numbers of people here. So please do post to the chat. If you've got something to say, wave. I'm sure one of us will see if you've activated your video. So Bobby Harreveld, of course, I want you in here. You've sent me a text message. I just got that.
You
just
don't have to dob me in for everything I say.
Yeah. So Professor Bobby Harreveld is here, and in her capacity as the link between research and scholarship. So Bobby, you're getting dobbed in for that. So thank you very much for being here, and you're much appreciated. All right, so what I thought I'd do is I'll just talk and then I'll pose a question. I'll start the question with Tania, but I just want to set the scene a little bit first, because I am operating from the assumption that many of us who are here today will have limited experience in the university sector. So that's the assumption that I'm operating from. So if it is revealed that we can all jump to more advanced stuff, then all that's great. But I just thought I would explain. Now, one of the things I wanted to start with was how the university sector operates and how a university operates. Now, I'm the chair of academic board, and for some people, they've heard of academic board, but they don't really know what academic board does and why do we need an academic board. So I'm going to operate on the assumption that we need a little bit of a reminder of what academic board is, and then I'll work down from there. So our university, CQU, is very much the same as a lot of other universities in various forms. We might call names, the different titles, or what. For the most part, the university is structured as it is. Our university, CQUniversity, is structured as it is because of legislation and because of the higher education standards, and that's oversight is by TEQSA, the Tertiary Education Quality Standards Authority. The way that we operate as a university is dictated by that to a certain extent. So a lot of what I'm going to say, although it might have different words, is probably going to be similar to all universities. We have a council that is the management oversight of our university. It's headed by a chancellor, and the vice chancellor, who you met yesterday, Professor Nick Klomp, is basically the university's CEO. He manages the day-to-day operation of the university, while the council is the board of directors. They oversight everything, make sure that we're all operating within expected parameters. Under the part of a subcommittee of council is academic board. Academic board is the senior most academic committee of the university, and its responsibility has a number of subcommittees, and its responsibility is to make sure that we are operating in to a quality that is expected by TEQSA and the higher education standards. So academic board makes sure, in a nutshell, make sure that the qualifications that we are offering as a university are the qualifications that we say. So if we say that teaching scholars are teaching into a level 7 bachelor's degree, then it is the responsibility of academic board and its subcommittees to ensure that the quality of those that teaching is at the level 7 bachelor's level. So that's a very important responsibility, because without that oversight, there's no way that we can prove that we're operating as a university. All universities in Australia have self-accrediting ability. That is, that TEQSA grants us the ability to govern ourselves and ensure that the quality is set at a certain standard, and we go through a re-accreditation every 7 years. For the most part, every 7 years, generally speaking. Now, and there are a number of subcommittees that really impact on teaching scholars in particular. So academic board is the highest one, but the ones that you'll be most familiar with at your level in teaching scholars, for most teaching scholars, will be the course committees and then education committee. Now, education committee is a subcommittee of academic board, and the chair of our education committee is Joshua Pnar, who's activated his video, and I can see him now. So what I might very quickly do, actually, Josh, if you want to explain, I'll put you on the spot there, buddy. If you want to explain the purpose of education committee, if you're a teaching scholar and you're responsible for writing assessments and responsible for making changes to a unit and the way that you're teaching a unit, depending on the level of those changes, it needs to go through a series of committees. There are some committees, like a course committee, which is what we have as our lowest level committee at the university, may approve some really minor changes. But if there are changes to a course structure or the assessment requirements or values of assessments, it needs to then go to our education committee. So Josh.
All right, so putting me on the spot there, and I'm trying to open up a PowerPoint at the same time. Just to...
Oh, your PowerPoint, no, you don't need to do a PowerPoint, it's okay, just on the spot is fine.
Oh, okay.
You're very organised, good for you.
I thought, well, I knew that I had a PowerPoint somewhere that would explain all of this. But in any case, what it is Celeste is correct. So there's a couple of committees that we have to go through. So let's go back all the way to when you get this brand new idea of creating a new course at the university. Probably it's going to start off with either a head of course or a academic that's really entrenched in that discipline area that wants to take the university to that next level. And you decide, okay, I'm going to start that. And you'll work with your colleagues in the university. You'll start thinking about the course and what you want to achieve. And in the back of your mind, you are always going to keep the higher education standards framework handy, as I do. And you're also going to have a copy of the AQF just sitting there on your desk so that you can quickly reference to that. And the AQF is a marvelous document. It is going to change. Everybody think it's going to change in the next 3 months. I think it's going to change in the next 18 months. I don't think it's going to be that quick, so watch that space. But back to our course developer and head of course. So off you go. You've got this amazing idea of a new initiative for the university. You get your team together and off you go. You start writing that first concept. You've got the idea. Obviously, you have to get approval through the Dean of School. That goes off to the Vice Chancellor's Advisory Committee. They look at it. Is it something that we want to do at the university? Does it align with our values and our strategic plan at the university? And then once that's all approved, it comes back to you. And this is now where you start doing the actual work and designing everything and starting to think about, okay, well, this is the course. And these are the high-level course outcomes, the course learning outcomes that we want to achieve. And those high-level course learning outcomes, say there's about 5 or 7 of them maximum, we don't want more of that, that's what the students are going to end up with at the end of the day. That's what they are going to be doing. That clearly delineates exactly what our students are walking away with at the university. But you're also going to work a little bit down and create units, and each of the units will have unit learning outcomes. And those unit learning outcomes build up to the course learning outcomes as well. So you can see all of it sort of funnels upwards into this overarching idea of the course. Now, Celeste put me on the spot. I'm not sure exactly how much time I have, so I'll take until she interrupts me. But in any case, so if you start...
Keep it short, guys. Keep it short.
Okay. All right. So keep it short. So basically, all of the work that you do then gets collected in our system, which is called Ames. That goes off to our course committee. The course committee then pulls it apart and says, oh, no, this isn't good enough. And what about this? Did you think about that? And you have a couple of robust discussions. Let's call it robust discussions, where you decide, yes, this is now good enough. Once you decide it's good enough, it goes off to Education Committee. And Education Committee is the most fun committee at the university. It's very, very engaging. It's fun to see people in action. It's lovely, collegiate. There's lots of jokes. And it's very, very functional. I'm just saying that out there. Giving myself a plug for that Education Committee. So there at Education Committee, the most collegiate committee in the university, we look at those proposals and we say, all right, yes, this makes sense. Did you look at the Scholarship of Learning and Teaching? Is there enough internationalization in there? What are you doing in terms of social innovation? And of course, will all of this map up to our graduate attributes and, the strategic plans for the university? Once you get through Education Committee, you're through. That means that your course and your proposals have been deemed to be good enough. It's got the right quality approach to it. And now you can really start working on those proposals to get the brand new course and units lined up. So Celeste also mentioned that sometimes it's not necessary to go all the way up to Education Committee. So if it's an existing course with existing units and you want to make small tweaks to the units, those small tweaks can be approved at the course committee level. So at the course committee level, there's going to be quite a lot of forwards and backwards questions about quality, making sure that those changes are justified, and it's going to bring up the, let's call it modernness or contemporaneity of that specific unit. A key thing that we are probably not that great at the moment that we are working on is keeping the overarching view in mind of, if we slot out this unit and we slot in another one, is it still contributing to the overarching course learning outcomes? So remember, when you take out a square brick and you put in a round paver in that space, it's probably not going to do the same thing. And that's what we are working towards and getting all of that together. So Celeste, there we go. That was the shortest version ever. I can keep on going for quite some time.
You can, Josh, and actually that's a really nice segue, because when you're talking about taking out a square brick and trying to replace it with a round one and it not fitting, that's actually it kind of leads nicely into the way that we as teaching scholars need to reflect on our practice. And perhaps you've seen a really funky way of doing an assessment and you want to try it, and now that is part of what we are talking about in relation to scholarly activity, that is, that you are reflecting on your teaching practice and then trying to implement that practice to your students. So I think that's a really good segue into how we can start talking about the reflection of our own scholarly practice. And I might jump straight to either Bobby or Tania to think about, or to maybe reflect on how, if we are our own teacher, we're teaching scholars, we've got our own units, and we want to say, oh, maybe the students didn't really like that, and now I want to do this new assessment. It's all scary. There's lots of people saying, oh, you need to get ethics approval to make changes or to use student data. If I'm just making a change in assessment, do I need to get ethics approval to use that student data to make changes in my assessment? Can I go to Tania first?
Okay, well, I'd like to say that you have to apply to ethics for everything. Everything is, but it's not true. Okay, ethics comes into play when you are doing a research piece. You're doing something that's specifically researched with an intent to disseminate that outcome beyond your unit, okay, or beyond within your own discipline, your own course, within. So you're wanting it to go outside of the university. So it doesn't matter whether that going outside is a conference paper or a community event or a publication in a journal or writing it up in a book. As soon as it's leaving your unit and it's going outside, that meets the criteria for a research output per the national statement. And the national statement is the Australian National Statement on Ethical, Responsible, Human-Based Research, which I would, as a hint, make sure that you've got a copy of, just because it makes it easier when you're doing your application. As soon as it goes outside the university, as soon as you are communicating it broader, it counts as a research project, and you need to have some form of ethical approval. But not all forms of ethical approval do the same things, and they trigger off at different levels. So you'll have heard people talk about having to submit a full, huge application to the ethics committee, and it takes a month and you don't hear back for ages. That's only if you're doing something very deliberate that might have particular groups that trigger that requirement. So maybe you are working specifically with Indigenous students, or you might be working with, that the group of students that you're working with are vulnerable in another way. They might be an identifiable minority, from a religious minority or a political minority or a sexual minority. So you've got those there's a reason why you're triggering a higher risk research. You can also have low risk and secondary data. Now, a lot of teaching scholars will use secondary data where it's information that they've already collected during the process of doing the do of being a teacher, of working within your units. So it might be looking at the students' feedback behind the big red button, or it might be, let's have a look at what kind of posts they're making on Moodle after I've put up this new online explanation. Let's have a look at those kind of things. They're easier in some respects to get ethics because the data's already been gathered. But what you have to be mindful of and be very careful of is what the students are providing within Moodle, even if it's behind the big red button, counts as private data. It counts as their own, it's their data. So you've got to make sure that you're meeting privacy requirements, you're dealing with that data in a sensitive manner, and that's part of what we do and help you with through ethics. You also have to get permission through Josh, and I don't know if he's still on, I think he's disappeared. I know he's there, you've popped up on the boxes keep shifting around, so I'm looking at people and they keep moving. So there are a few different processes to go, but a lot of teaching scholars are increasingly doing research around their own teaching practice within their units using their student data, and you need to just think about your power and balance. You need to think about the fact that you are the unit coordinator, you are the person who's the gatekeeper of the grades. So is what you're doing likely to make your students feel like they're obligated to participate in the research? Is there a chance that what you're writing up, what you're going to look at, might embarrass a student? If you've got a cohort of 10 students and only one male student in that group, even if you're presenting aggregated data, but you go and, a breakdown by gender showed that men were less likely to fill in their applications on time, just random example, that potentially identifies that one individual. So these are the kind of things you need to think about. And the more risk there is to the student, the more risk there is within your ethics application, so the higher up the ethics ends up going through. But if you are just doing a change in your unit and you're just evaluating it, you're looking at what kind of scores and any changes to improve your own teaching practice, you're not intending to turn it into a research practice, you're not intending to disseminate it outside of the university, you're not going to bring it along to an online conference like this, then you don't need ethics.
Can I just ask, there's been a couple of follow-up questions there, Tania. There's one that's kind of asking questions in two different areas. One question is, can a vet teacher engage in research? Are they allowed to engage in research?
Absolutely.
And
yes.
And I'll go to Bobby after you, Tania. Or do they have to be in higher education first? And the answer is no. A vet teacher, in fact, we encourage vet teachers to engage in research. But if they're a vet teacher, do they have to go through ethics?
Yes, so anybody who's an employee of CQU, regardless of whether you're higher ed, you're vet, you're a professional staff member, if the grounds people suddenly decided they wanted to do ethics, they wanted to do a research project on, I don't know, people's appreciation of the length of grass outside the library, I don't know. If they're looking at publishing, they've got a CQU affiliation, they need to have ethics approval. What I would say, though, is that one of the requirements of the national statement is that the research team has sufficient expertise and appropriate expertise and experience in the kind of approach and techniques that are going to be used. So if you haven't done research before, then it's a very, very good idea to get a mentor, get someone else who can be part of the team, who can help guide you through the ethics process, help guide you through the data collection, because the end product and how good the paper is or the conference presentation is at the end is going to depend completely on the quality of the way in which you ask the questions, on the kind of data that you're managing to gather. And trust me, it is so easy to make a mistake that you don't even realise you're making right back at the beginning as you're conceptualising your research, that then means at the end you kind of go, wow, that didn't work. And it's easy. We've all made those kind of mistakes, and it's just when you've been through the process a few times, you know what to watch out for. So the ethics committee, if we get an application from someone who has got no research background, we will ask them and say, we need you to get someone else on board that has got research expertise in the kind of techniques that you're using. So whether that's survey, whether that's design, it depends on the project.
Thanks, Tania. I'll just ask Bobby now. Did you want to expand on that?
Actually, I will later, because Tania actually answered it. I was going to pick up, can the vet teacher engage in research? And the answer, I concur with what Tania said. Before we get to those specific questions from Richard and Sabi, I believe, the other issue is for me anyway, is research necessary? Can I find out what I want to find out by a really good reading of the literature? And that one of the things, as Lisa knows, and as we talk about Delma in those workshops, is the research word of have I looked at what's already out there, and have I looked at people, looked for people who are dealing with similar problems to me, because oftentimes we don't know what we don't know. And if we come new into this game, we think that we're the only ones that have ever met this problem. And oftentimes there's this whole constellation of people out there who've dealt with different issues. It may not necessarily be in my same discipline or profession, but if it's issues of teaching and learning, that often goes across the disciplines, and then sometimes you find little gems that are discipline specific. So that was all I was going to raise at this point, Celeste, because I think the other questions that are there for Tania to answer too.
Well, thank you, Bobby. Actually, I think that actually, yeah, I was looking at you, Delma, because I think that leads really nicely into the fact that we are encouraging our teaching scholars to undertake research, or perhaps the perceived pressure for teaching scholars to undertake research is encouraging them incorrectly to research something maybe that doesn't even need researching. And that's part of that pressure. Maybe we can work through that question as we're having a chat today. Delma, did you want to expand on that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in the spirit of debate, even though we can go out there and find it in the research, if we're not imposing on the students, if we're just looking at their data or their responses, it doesn't hurt to take the research lens to that information and do the analysis of the data for yourself to see that, yes, your students are, you know, behaving in a similar way to that reported from the University of in, I don't know, Christmas Island or something like that. So I'd still encourage people to be looking at that. But of course, if you have to apply for ethics and you want to do a special application to do an extra survey, that's when we're going to say no. So just that line. Did you want me to?
Yeah, no, hang on, hold that. Yeah, hold that thought, Delma. We will get to everything that you're doing. Trust me, we'll get to it. But I just want to just expand a little bit back to Tania on that point. Tania, I think I know where you're going to go with this one.
Yeah. One of the problems, and this is something that the university is, as a general thing, grappling with, because changes have occurred at both a federal and a state level around privacy and ownership of data. What students provide to us, to the university, has very strict and limited use that we are allowed to make use of. At this point in time, the privacy policy for the university does not include the right for you to use student data as a research project just to go and have a go at it. Okay, research is not mentioned in our privacy policy. We are working on that. That is something that is being worked on. So just, you've got to be mindful. If what you're intending to use is at aggregate level where it is not reasonably identifiable, you're not running the risk of saying this student in this campus at this place, then you're pretty much okay. But just be absolutely certain, get in touch with the ethics committee, okay? Because if we turn around and say, yep, you're fine, and it turns out later on that maybe you weren't, that's actually on us. It's not on you. So it's better to get in touch and just double check. If you've got any doubts at all, get in touch, double check. You can talk to Josh, or just add to Josh's workload. You can talk to Josh. Josh will also help you work through, do we need specific approval? Sometimes it's a matter you're going to actually have to go back to the students and say, can I use those emails you sent me? Is it okay if I use it? And that's a process. We can talk you through what kind of processes you need to meet federal and state privacy guidelines. Things under the big red button, look, they're anonymous, but I know I've looked at my big red button feedback from a course, from a unit and gone, yeah, I know that was Josh saying that, and I know Celeste said that, because you get used to your students. You know the kind of the voices and what they're saying. So you've got to be careful how you manage that. You also need to be really mindful. We've had quite a few applications recently where people are wanting to look in and they're wanting to evaluate the efficacy of a new implementation to avoid contract cheating, or to avoid plagiarism, or to avoid something that's quite sensitive. And then they want to name what unit they are, what unit they're teaching, and what term that was. And that it was students on the Melbourne campus versus the Brisbane campus. Now, each of those things, as you're narrowing it down, you make it more and more likely that someone can be identified. Even that hey, look, weren't you in that cohort? Didn't you go to Melbourne and study at CQU and do that course? Hey, look, this project has said that 90% of or 60% of the class were guilty of contract cheating. Those are the kind of things where we've got to be really, really careful, because that's breaching the privacy of the student, and it's not, that will not get approval. Because it's just not, you can't use it. Now, if you de-identified it completely and you didn't talk about campus, or you didn't talk about, obviously the CQU side of things is going to be obvious because it's the affiliation of the researcher, but you just got to be careful and mindful that you are using the data in a way that meets privacy guidelines. Having said that, if you're doing it for your own practice, you're doing it to inform your own teaching, and it's not going outside, then I agree completely with Delma that actually just getting used to using that research lens and asking yourself questions and seeing how you might answer questions given the kind of data sets that we had access to, that's absolutely fine and doesn't need ethics. It's just when you take it up and you're putting it out to the outside world.
Yeah, thank you, Tania. You got to it at the end. That was the bit. But actually, just to clarify, just a little bit more about privacy and student data. So I'm a teaching scholar. I've got just basic classroom data, numbers of students that have passed this unit, and do I need to get ethics approval to use that data?
So if it's things like, just as I've had 90 people enrolled in this course in this term, this unit this term, then we did XYZ, advertised it differently, and now I've got 200 in this unit in this term, that wouldn't. But if you want to start drilling down and saying, and this was the demographics, and this is the number of low SESS, and this is the number, as soon as you're starting to have to delve into the databases that the university holds that the students have provided their personal private information for, then the best bet is to make sure that you've got permissions through Josh and the ethics committee.
What if I'm not using it for research, but I do want to use it for my award application?
Oh, see, I knew you were going to ask tricky questions. I don't think it's not. The ethics committee is only involved in research. So if it doesn't meet the criteria for research, then it's not up to us. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't get approval through somewhere else. I don't know the answer to that question, but I can say it's not research. It's not my lookout.
Josh knows the answer.
Josh knows the answer.
Well, it's always follow a nice logical approach. So if you take anything outside of the university that can be accessed and read outside of the university, for instance, that OLT application for the award, the Learning and Teaching Award, anything that can end up in a newspaper somewhere or in a publication somewhere, even without your knowledge, people might just reference you because you're amazing and your stuff's all over the internet. And this happens quite often to other people, not myself, Bobby and Celeste and so on. But follow a nice logical approach and saying, all right, well, this possibly could go outside of my control. I might not know about it. And a student that was in my class might actually receive a copy of that somehow. The world takes funny turns, and then they might be offended, or they might be impacted. So always, if there's any doubt, pick up the phone and speak to Tania. Tania is she always answers my phone calls straight away, and I'll put a mobile number, I'll put in the chat window in a moment, so everybody's got it. No, just pick up the phone, send the email, ask, hey, is this okay? And 99% of the time we're going to come back to you really, really quickly and say, hey, this is okay to continue, or hey, this is low impact, or just fill out this form, make sure we cover it, because it might come back later, and it always comes back really at an inconvenient time. So for instance, when you apply for promotion, a week before the time, some kind of critical event occurs, and then your name is all over the newspaper, and it just creates lots of difficulties. So long way to say just ask.
Actually, it raises a really good issue there, Josh, and I think we need to be very clear in the difference with what we're talking about. So on the one side, we're talking about use of student data for research purposes, and on the other side, we're talking about the use of student data to improve our teaching practice. And sometimes they overlap, but they are distinct purposes for using data. And so, yeah, go on, Tania.
Well, I was going to say, there are times when you might do your evaluation, do your stuff to improve your teaching practice, and you know what? it's really cool and it's really interesting, and you suddenly go, hey, you know, this is really good. Maybe you've talked to a colleague who's gone, wow, that's great. I haven't read anything like that in the literature. You've got to publish. This doesn't mean you are lost. It means get in touch with the ethics committee, and we will help you find a way to work through that and get retrospective approval, use it as archival. But that doesn't mean that should be your fallback position. If we get more than one or two from you going, whoops, and I've worked out this is really great and I really want to publish it, we're going to start going, yeah, now you're pulling the wool, okay? So, but in the case where it is a genuine, look, I was doing this, I was evaluating, I've been talking to Delma, I've been looking at my numbers so I can improve my teaching practice, and you know what? This has made a huge impact and I'd really like to be able to present on it. Talk to us. We will help you find a way through the ethics, and to mean that we are meeting the national statement, we are meeting up the students' privacy, and you can write it up. Okay, so it's not that it's always better to get ethics first or to get in touch with us first. But if you are doing something that is genuinely for teaching, improving your teaching practice, and it turns into something that is worth publishing or is worth disseminating, then let us know and we will help you work your way through. I've put in the chat the ethics email address, ethics@cqu.edu.au, gets you to the ethics officers. Okay, we've got 3 ethics officers now, one of them kindly paid for by Josh. So there's 3 ethics officers. You will get a response from there. You will get it in writing, and we will say things like, yep, you definitely need ethics and this is the kind of ethics you need, or you know what, no, do you need an ethics exemption number? So we can give you a number. Some projects you just don't need ethics for. If you're using publicly available information that's on Twitter or Facebook or, you know, newspaper articles around the efficacy of media communication at CQU, something like that, you don't necessarily need an ethics application because they're available publicly, but we can give you an exemption number because some journals you have to have an ethics number to publish regardless. But if you get in touch with us, we'll give you a determination and then you keep that email. So if at some point down the track, someone says to you, hey, you should have got ethics, you go, I got an email from them. And you're fine, you're covered, okay? But if you don't get in touch with us and you just try and do something and you quietly slip in some interviews or you quietly slip in a focus group or a questionnaire, then it can go pear-shaped at promotion time, or it can go pear-shaped later on. So my advice is similar to Josh, is just ask. We will send you an email back really quick. The ethics officers are fantastic. They've got an incredible wealth of knowledge, and when they get stuck, they then send it to me. So we've got room, you know, to give you feedback.
And I guess it's worth reinforcing too, Tania, that we make a hoo-ha out of it because the punishments are so very severe. Just there are a couple of questions that have come up in the chat, and we'll get to them. But can you just give us a once-over on what the punishments are?
Yeah, okay. So then there's 2 overarching frameworks that govern research in Australia. We've got the ethics framework, which applies to both human and animal research. So the animal research have their own code. I only do the human research. If you've got animal research questions, you'll have to hold them and we can direct you to someone else. But the human research ethics covers probably, I would say, about 70 to 80% of the research is covered done at CQU. And then we have the research integrity framework. And this is around being responsible and appropriate researchers. It incorporates ethics, but it goes so far beyond. It wraps around things like publishing, so making sure that you've got authorship on there, that you are presenting data accurately and you're not making things up, that you treat participants correctly, you treat the money that you get given from the Commonwealth as a Commonwealth employee through the university correctly, the participants are looked after. There's a whole heap, there's 8 pillars in the research integrity framework. Now, ethics is one of those pillars, and if you breach ethics, so there's a process, if a breach of ethics has occurred, we find that you have conducted research without getting appropriate ethics approval, or you got ethics approval and then did something different again, so you didn't actually follow that approval, then you can be found guilty of research misconduct. If you are found guilty of research misconduct, there's a whole sequence of events that occurs in there, and there's lawyers involved, and there's all sorts of hearings and things. A very unpleasant process for everybody involved. But if you are actually found guilty of research misconduct, the university is required to inform any future employer of yours for the rest of your natural span that you have been found guilty of research misconduct. We have to inform the ARC, we have to inform the NHMRC, we have to inform any of those organisations. So that will be, and if you go for an application to, you know, for Cat 1 funding or anything, up will come a flag that says being found guilty of research misconduct. If you go and apply to another university, the CQU has a requirement to let them know, hey, by the way, do you know this applicant has been found guilty of research misconduct? So it's really, really not worth skating on the thin edge. Get in touch with us, get in touch with myself, get in touch with Josh, get in touch with people, get in touch with a mentor who can talk it through, and then you can get an email from ethics or from Josh that says, you're fine, you don't need ethics for this. And then you've got that. So that if anything else goes on, you can say, but I've sought advice. And the buck stops with us, not with you at that point.
And further to that, Tania, is the implications for the university as well, if we allow research misconduct to take place.
Yeah, so not obviously when a staff member is found guilty of research misconduct, you can bet your bottom dollar it hits the front page of the Australian. You can bet your bottom dollar it goes everywhere, and then it affects the reputation of everybody that's at CQU. Worst case scenario, if it's found that there's a systemic lack of, you know, ethics, people checking up on ethics, checking that integrity thing, we might actually lose the ability to have an ethics committee. And at that point, say goodbye to research or human-based research. So there are some universities in Australia that have had to outsource their ethics. They no longer have their own ethics committee. Now what that means is that, and they have to pay per application. That obviously means only certain research applications get put through to the external paid ethics process. So it stymies and it really shortens the breadth of what research can go on. So it might seem like ethics is everywhere, and you may have seen me pop up all over the place, and I keep on having these doom and gloom messages about get your ethics or else. And you may have been someone who got pulled up with a, hey, your abstract looks like it needs ethics and you don't seem to have it, you know, for this conference. The reason we do that is not only to protect your reputation and your, you know, continued career, but also very selfishly to protect CQU and to protect the rest of us as well.
On that joyful note, thanks, Tania. We'll just go through these couple of questions that have come up, and then we'll move on from the joyful topic of ethics onto something. So Richard has asked, if you ask students to interview some people solely for learning assessment purposes, is ethics approval required?
If it is solely for assessment purposes and it will never go outside of the unit, so it's just for an assessment piece, then you do not need ethics.
And can we use the data that students submitted as part of their assessment tasks for the course for research purposes?
If you believe that there is going to be a research purpose, then you need to get ethics. And I would suggest you get ethics ahead of the students collecting the data.
Yeah, so I mean, that's just a really good point. So we do have the option at CQU. I don't know how many other universities have that. We do have the option at CQU of getting pre-ethics approval, don't we?
Yes, we do. And you can get course-wide ethics approval. So if you've got a unit and you've got, say, 10 students that are all going to go out, collect bits of data, and then they come together and they work as a group, or they might do, you know, that, then you can get a course-wide ethics approval if you know they're all going to do similar projects, and we can get that set up ahead of term time so that it's all in place before you get going. We also have a course ethics approval process specifically for coursework research students. And it is separate to the main ethics process, because the main ethics process is just not quick enough to support your students within a term. So if you've got someone that's got a unit that's got a 12-week term and they've got to do a research project and they've got to get ethics and they've got to get data and they've got to write up and submit, and taking 4 weeks to get ethics is just not doable. They won't get through. So again, with Josh's support, we have been able to put together a coursework process which is much quicker. The only people who see those coursework applications are myself and the 2 ethics officers. So the 3 of us triage, read through all of those and get the ethics through, and then they're ratified by the ethics committee. And our turnaround for that is between 7 to 10 days. So we try to do that as quick as possible. Now, a lot of, say, the psychology honours, which is what I'm really familiar with, we work with our students. They get the ethics through that coursework ethics, and yes, we get publication out at the end with our students we're supervising. So it's quite common, and I would suggest it's one of the best ways to make use of. You've got to do the supervision of coursework or undergraduate students. It's not easy because they've got training wheels on. They're learning themselves the research project. So to aim for publication at the end is a good idea. But if you've got that in front and centre, get ethics beforehand. And if you've got a course where the students are all pulling the data in and then you want to do one that's sort of an overarching, just be thinking quite carefully about whether the students should be included as authors or how you're going to do that, because the integrity framework has some very strict guidelines around who can be an author and who should be an author if they've contributed, they've gone through and done the data collection. So just be mindful of that and that you don't trip over any of those regulations.
And there's just another question here, just in general, if interviewing people in the community with COPD, I don't know what that is. What is COPD, Colleen? Around their experiences with the illness, will this be low risk?
So that's chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, sort of respiratory disease, Celeste.
Okay, one of the triggers for full committee review is if someone is dependent on medical care. So if they are dependent on medical care to deal with day-to-day life, then it automatically triggers a full committee review. We don't have any choice about it. That's outlined in the national statement. Yeah.
Thanks, Tania. Great.
And I think it's quite impressive that there are a number of people who obviously know what COPD is. Okay, so we will move on to the various other topics, but Tania, hang around, please, because I'm sure that there is going to be some more links. So Delma, if I could just turn to you, my question screen has gone off. Delma, while I'm getting my questions up, difference between scholarly activity and scholarship.
The difference between scholarly activity is sort of like the difference between dessert and pavlova. So scholarly activity is the dessert and scholarship of learning and teaching is the pavlova. Scholarship of learning and teaching is a type of scholarly activity, but scholarly activity incorporates a lot more than that. So if I can bring up a single PowerPoint to share with you.
And while you're bringing that up, Delma, too, can you also mention how we measure our scholarship, or even indeed how we measure our scholarly activity?
No, I won't do that at the moment. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so this is a diagram I've created to indicate the professional development of an academic. So for all of you who've come in from the clinical side of things, you're probably really familiar with this. You may start out as a casual and you're simply doing some demonstrating in the lab, or you've been doing some clinical precepting in the clinical environment in hospitals. When you come on, you'll be doing some marking, some tutorials, lectures, assessments, and that's the doing of the teaching. But as an academic, the HESF and indeed CQU requires you to become a scholarly teacher. You need to be just a little bit more than a monkey see, monkey do. You need to start to inform your teaching and improve your teaching using the published literature. So you'll be reading texts and journals, you'll be reflecting on your practice in light of what you read, you'll be going to conferences like this one and hearing about the research that other people are doing, undertaking professional development activities such as the SALT training that we're offering, and you'll be thinking about, here's a new way to do something, I might try this. And I think some of the stuff Kerry Reed-Searle has done over her career is particularly innovative. And you might try those things and they might work and they might not. As I think Celeste said earlier, failure is not a bad thing. If you are a research scholar, you will also eventually undertake your own research and you'll develop new knowledge in the area of your discipline. So if you're an engineer, you might develop a new way of mixing concrete. And you would do the experiments, write up the papers, present them at conferences, perhaps get them published in technical journals or write technical notes as well. If you're a teaching scholar, though, you're not required to do that discipline research. And because you're not required to do that, they immediately get you to do more teaching. But don't despair, use that teaching positively and start to evaluate your own practice in a scientific or in a scholarly manner. And so you will make observations about what works, you'll develop a hypothesis about why it may work, you'll design some experiments that might demonstrate whether or not prove whether or not it works, or might support your hypothesis about why it works, and then write a paper and publish that or present it at a conference. And then you can take that information and you can run a workshop with your colleagues and improve their practice as well. And at that point, you're undertaking the scholarship of learning and teaching. So have a look at this personally and decide where on this particular area are you sitting at the moment. If I gave you this diagram, which ones would you highlight and say, hey, I do that and I do this and I do something else? And then you can see what scholarly activity you're doing. That's just one where I've taken out the discipline research just for those doing those teaching-focused academics. Now, it's important to realise that even if you're a teaching-focused academic, you still have to stay up to date with your discipline knowledge. So you still undertake some scholarly activity in the discipline area. But you can see I've taken out most of the high-level stuff in the research in that diagram. So you might attend a conference in your discipline. You might go and undertake industry experience. I think nursing staff often go back and work on the wards for about 4 weeks a year or do some shifts on weekends to maintain their skills. But you still need to cover both of those according to the HESF requirements. That's the Higher Education Standards Framework requirements. And TEXA asks us to demonstrate that you're going to do that. I think I'll stop there, Celeste. I wanted to keep it fairly brief.
Yeah, no, actually, but can you just expand just on that last point you just said that TEXA requires us to demonstrate? How do we, as a university, demonstrate that our teaching scholars are doing this? And how do our teaching scholars demonstrate maybe to their CVs that they are engaged in scholarly activity?
At the moment, the only way we're doing it is through the PRPD. So come PRPD time, you are required to list down the things you've done in the last year. Your supervisor should be checking that you are maintaining currency in both learning and teaching and in discipline. So it's also important to note that if you're a discipline researcher, you're still required to do scholarly activity in the area of learning and teaching. Not as much. You might attend every second year, you might attend a teaching and learning conference. Or you might attend this conference and you might think, gee, I saw Glow's discussion on the app for her learning and teaching. I'd love to try that in my my unit on creating concrete mixes. And so you might talk to Glow and adopt her app, or at least the outline of it, the skeleton of it, and that would be your scholarly activity in learning and teaching.
So, well, actually, I'll just expand on that too a little bit, if that's okay, Delma. In terms of scholarship and scholarly activity, for most universities, there is a requirement to show evidence of scholarship for promotion purposes. So if you're going for a promotion, you're mostly you will be required to show evidence of scholarship. Someone's got their microphone open. That's
me, probably.
Bad. Maybe I didn't think it was you, Delma, but maybe it was. So one of the ways that you can show evidence of operating at a level B or a level C or a level D is evidence of scholarship for teaching scholars, that is. So evidence of scholarship. So it is important for you to be able to articulate the type of scholarship that you're engaged in so that you can put that onto your CV, or even, like Delma said, the PRPD, which is our equivalent of our performance, our annual performance at CQU. So not all universities will call it a PRPD. It'll be some sort of annual performance review that you undertake at your various universities. But the important bit there is being able to articulate what it is that you're doing. And that's kind of what I was looking at, Delma. How can we go about articulating what it is that we do? And I think part of the thing is the recognition of the individual tasks and that it is scholarly activity.
Absolutely, and you'll also need to gather that evidence for award purposes. If you ever get an email that's really complimentary from a student, convert it to a PDF and save it. You'll be looking for it one day.
Sorry, Delma, there's a couple of questions that have come up for you, Delma.
Okay.
One of them is
that's
okay. Where does currency fit? That is, how frequently do we need to do or demonstrate these things, all or some of them?
The good news is that TEXA doesn't put numbers on this. So if you're a vet teacher, and I know there are a couple of vet teachers watching, you're required to do what's called TPMS, and you have to show 100 points for the year. And over the course of the year, you should be showing progression to that 100 points, not doing it all at once. So TEXA is now requiring us to show evidence, but they are not saying how much. So as a guide, you use your position description or your level description in the academics profiles and procedures document. So if you go in there, you'll see that level Bs are required to attend a conference or present a poster and that sort of thing. And when you get to level D, you're required to show leadership in learning and teaching. So you'll see some generic descriptors in there if you want to go and look for them. What we are getting, though, is an automatic system that will pull all the information together and put it into what we call PEP share. That's I forget what PEP means, but it's something to do with performance enhancement and profiles. And you'll be able to send this through to your supervisor and get it ticked off. Now, that's going to be ready about the end of this month. So you'll be able to see live demonstrations of it very shortly. That's just my schema. When I went to IATD, I said, this is what I would like. And, you know, they've been able to do nearly everything except this one down here on Outlook, which would pull through all your meetings and just let you tick a box. But they've also told me that that's possible next year. So watch this space.
This is a remarkably complicated slide, Delma. There's another chat that's just come through. Can I just, and there's one more chat. So question is, so how does this work for a casual academic who doesn't really have a supervisor, even though contract has name on it that you're supposed to be a supervisor? How does it work for a teaching scholar, casual academic? Casual
academics at the moment they're being paid 2 hours a year to do a little bit of scholarly activity. That doesn't mean they have to do 2 hours.
Yeah. Sorry, I should say this. That's for us at CQU, but yes. More generally.
More generally, well, for us at CQU, casual academics are going to be identified with a supervisor. At the moment, they do have a supervisor. It's actually the head of course. But we're discussing this with the DDLTs to try to find a way that such a workload won't be dumped on the heads of courses. And
I'll just jump in there and I'll say a DDLT is a Deputy Dean Learning and Teaching.
Yep. And the PEP share system will also be operating for casuals. So they'll have access to that as well. Now, previously they haven't done PRPDs, but again, HESF actually says we have to give them feedback on their performance. So they will be doing mini PRPDs, if you like. So we are working on the system about how the supervision and the human resources behind that will work. But this system will be covering the casuals as well. I'm just trying to think. In terms of scholarly activity, if you go to our Learning and Teaching StaffNet page, you will find 2 pages there. One is on scholarly activity and one is on the Scholarship of Learning and Teaching. And they will have this information there as well. So you'll be able to access these categories. But you can see here that it's sort of in a hierarchy with the very top, I suppose you would call it, the most prestigious outputs from scholarly activity at the top. And so this is for discipline research, where you're getting grants and project proposals and publishing peer-reviewed papers, all the way down to simply being a member of a journal club where you get together once a month and you discuss the latest articles in your discipline area. We have a similar list of activities for teaching and learning. And there's a lot of parallels between them. We still have the research at the top, peer-reviewed publications, presentations, all the way down to applying for teaching awards, where you'll be reflecting on your own practice and you'll be interacting with the literature in order to do so. So I just wanted to show you those. I think that's about all we need to do today with that, Celeste. But
yeah, thank you. No, that's
questions.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you, Delma. Actually, well, it leads nicely. Kate Ames has joined us. I think it leads really nicely into Kate knows about how to implement innovative teaching practices, maybe into a bureaucracy that is a bit stifled, you know, and there's some challenges, and we as teaching scholars want to do something that's U-Butte and fantastic in what we think is an innovative teaching practice, but struggle to work within the bureaucracy or the systems that we've got. You got any comments in relation to that, Kate?
Yeah, look, so where do I begin? So hello everyone, I'm Kate, if you don't know me. So I've been at CQU since 1995, and I started as a professional staff member, was a part-time academic in the late 90s teaching desktop publishing. So I'd come from a magazine, a professional background. So I was typical of that practitioner background. I had a master's degree, didn't have a PhD, taught the way that I'd always been taught, you know, that kind of thing. Was a bit arrogant, I think, and probably quite dismissive of student experience at the time. I was a middle-class white girl, come from the city into a regional area, and, you know, yeah, probably had attitude. So anyway, became humbled pretty quickly and moved over to being an academic in 2001, having had my fingers burned, you know, in that relationship that you get with students. You can either take up the fight or you can become a reflective practitioner. And so I became the reflective practitioner. So I did laugh this morning when the session that I was facilitating, oh no, it was Pauline, where she had the flaming, the academic in flames, you know, and on the beach in the middle of the fight. I totally related to that. So in terms of innovation, I was always interested in the student experience and how do I, that student-focused, student-centred learning. And I've always really, I suppose, adopted an assessment for learning approach. And examples of really small things I did really early on were I ignored the assessment extension policy. This was probably one of my first. And Celeste might remember this one, where I just let students submit whenever they wanted to. So, and I gave them feedback if they submitted on time, because clearly if they wanted the feedback, they submitted on time. I gave them the feedback, and if they didn't want to submit on time, that's fine. Go knock yourself out. But I'm not going to invest the time or my time into providing you with the feedback if you don't want it. Now, there are clearly some students who have very, very genuine reasons for not submitting on time but still want the feedback. So I still enabled that, but generally speaking, students could take the hit. So you kind of had that past student, don't really care, never going to engage in the feedback. And so that worked for a while. Actually, I had zero admin. We just did not have to worry about extension requests. I managed one or two. These were large courses. Then it became too hard to fight the policy, so I just went with the policy. Okay, that was fine. But that was kind of my first step in engaging with doing things a little bit differently and then seeing how that worked. So I've kind of then consistently applied that throughout my my practice. Sometimes I've been before the policy, so I've been engaging in public drafting via social media now for many, many years. You know, how that fits within our overall policy. You know, I think we haven't quite addressed some of that stuff in terms of social media for teaching. A lot of the institutions haven't quite caught up with that or addressed that from a range of perspectives. But I'm happy to fail. So I have become happy to fail. And I think I've had a few spectacular failures, but not too many, not too many. I think as long as you clearly have the student experience in mind, you are open to having that conversation and taking them on the journey with you, become a reflective practitioner. So in some cases, I've got ethics applications before I've started, because I've known that what I was about to do was going to be a little bit different, and I needed to consider all of the risks. You need to always be conscious of risks and exposing students to stuff, and then stating to very clearly to students, look, I've never really kind of done this before, so I'm going to we'll be a bit flexible with some stuff along the way. So I'm obviously now in an innovation space, and that student experience is central. So yeah. Is that what you're looking for? I never answer a question in succinctly. So
no, you don't. Okay. But no, that will do. But actually, more so, advice and to if we do have some grand idea to do something a little bit differently, what's your advice? I mean, currently the way that I read that was just go out and do it, but that's probably not really the take-home message here.
No, do research first. So, everything, I would always start something now with, well, what do we know about that? So as an example, online exams, we've got a course that we've got a lot of online exams. Everyone's got an opinion on everything you do. Should students be out there and doing publicly exposing themselves via social media? Should they be doing X, Y, Z? So the first thing is to go and find the existing literature on that particular thing. And sometimes in learning and teaching, you have to dig a little bit deep, obviously, for those of you who know, the answer's not quite there. It might not be, it's not that you're actually looking for social media and public drafting. It might be that you're looking for reflective practice in public sphere. It might be that you have to do a different kind of keyword search, but nonetheless, firstly step off and see, well, what's already done. If there is no research, it doesn't mean it's a good idea. It might be that, it's actually too high risk and it's never going to work. And there might be one or two studies out there. The other thing also, I think, particularly in CQU's context, we've got 26 campuses, multi-mode, we have a very, very complex teaching environment. And so what I often find is, I need to do my literature review quite systematically, because what you might read something and go, oh yeah, okay, but then it's only for on-campus students, or it's a flipped classroom, or it's only in one context. Whereas when, for most of us at CQU and other universities such as USQ or those big multimodal universities, they're quite complex teaching arrangements. So that then identifies a gap, but that then is a methodological problem and a research problem. So always scholarship first and then proceed.
Actually, thanks, Kate. That leads on to a question that has been posted to me: is that what is actually a teaching scholar? Is a teaching scholar someone who does research as well as teaches the students? So that's actually, you'd think it would be a really easy question to answer, but it's not such an easy question to answer. Bobby, yes, I'm looking at you, Bobby. What's your take on what a teaching scholar is? So, I mean, we have classifications of under the enterprise agreement as to, a person who is doing this amount of teaching and this amount of research, a teaching scholar or a teaching intensive or a research. What's your take on what a teaching scholar is?
Right, I knew you were going to ask me that, and it's always difficult, isn't it? To me, a teaching scholar is exactly someone who engages in scholarly activity. However, a teaching scholar can also be a researcher, and some of the best teaching scholars that I know who are participating in this panel discussion this afternoon, I might add, and I could embarrass every single one of you by naming you, including Mary Mackenzie and Tracy Symes, but of course I won't name people, are people who take that next step and do, as Tania said, they actually take their work outside their own unit. And Lisa Brecknell and the rest of it. Not that I'm dropping names like Gemma Mann or anyone. And I think that, including our Provost Chancellor, Joshua Pinard, I think that that's, to me, whatever your question was, I think that that's where teaching scholars engage in research. And to be honest, Celeste, you're one of the best examples as well, not using names. It's writing yourself in to a body of knowledge and contributing to knowledge in that particular area. And in this instance, it might be knowledge about in the field of nursing education, it might be in the field of sonography education, it might be in the field of whatever. It may also be contributing in Kate's area to innovations in innovation spaces. So it's when you buy into a community of knowledge that you actively contribute to and participate in via publications, etc., etc. If you're a teaching scholar, though, Celeste, as we all know, the other issue is that you don't have the burden of having to bring in external money. Yep. So I think that's one of the things that I constantly see the researchers in that middle level. God help us, we get categorised into little boxes enough in our lives, but this is one of the biggie that categorises us, isn't it? And then when you shift along the spectrum, it's not a hierarchy, it's just a spectrum. And you can move in and out of it over a 2-3 year period by negotiation with your line managers. And Celeste, I think that's really important to raise as well, to put it on the agenda. My hair was not always this colour, let's face it, nor was yours. So, or you, Tania Signal. So you know what I mean? Their life has its ebbs and flows. And as an academic, my career has ebbed and flowed across that continuum. So could I get that out on the agenda, Celeste, that it's not forevermore I have to be this?
And actually, that is exactly what I had hoped you would say, Bobby.
Oh, we didn't script this, by the way.
I know that we have these classifications, but there's flexibility within those classifications.
And you get curious about things, don't you? I mean, that's why you do research, or you get. I can't say what I would say. There was something I was going to say, but you get cheesed off. I mean, I remember when the first time I started doing research, I got cheesed off about something I was supposed to do as a teacher.
Yeah,
and I did. Sorry, Tania, I did scholarly activity because I was cheesed off. I actually had a better word for it. And then all of that, and then that led into the research, to learning, the art and the craft of research. Tania.
I think one thing that's important to remember too is with the EB and all our profiles and all the boxes that they're trying to put us in, you don't have to do it on your own. It's not, when you're looking at those ticking off on the EB and the outputs and all of those kind of things, it's not you on your own. A team of people can put a publication together or a conference presentation together, and you all get the tick for having an output. So it might be that the person beside you, who in the office next to you, who might be teaching in a different unit but has similar challenges to you, you can both work together and say, right, let's compare, let's contrast. And by having more than one of you, it's less lonely. It also means you share the wins, and you also share when you get that awful review back from reviewer 2 that tells you a horrible thing about what you've done. You've got someone else to commiserate with. So you don't have to do this by yourself. Teamwork's a good thing.
And picking up exactly on that, one of the things that I know that there are other people from other universities here, so I won't be so bold as to presume to talk for their colleagues. However, looking at some of the faces that we've got online tonight, some of the best fun, I mean, you can actually work and have fun in this game. It's a novel idea, I know, but the enjoyment of our work comes from working across the disciplines and where our disciplines intersect. And Tania, that's where you have the teamwork within the disciplines, and then you also can get out of your own backyard, and particularly in questions around teaching and learning and assessment and, those areas. Celeste, you look at you and I, we've had the best fun over the last few years in working with people in different disciplines, and we learn different skills and we read into different areas, and therefore we grow and develop as well. So it's both within but across. Tracy may and Mary may also think, I don't know. Over to you, Celeste. Is that what you wanted? I don't know.
No, you're great, Bobby. As always, you are very articulate and engaging and inspirational. So, and thank you, Bobby. And just while you were speaking, Delma did pose a question as well. Just like to know how much additional extra effort is a casual academic expected to put into relevant professional development, and probably
that was
more
a question posed to me.
Oh, yeah, right. Okay, no worries.
So I'd like to answer it.
And probably more importantly, what would demonstrate what we are doing?
Okay. Couple of questions there. Just want to point out that when a casual academic gets a contract to do an hour's teaching and they are paid at about $125 an hour, that actually incorporates 3 or 4 hours of preparation time. So I did a bit of an exercise and I went through and I said, okay, if a casual academic is going to be delivering 2 hours of lectures a week over a term, so that's 24 lectures, that equated to about 72 hours of preparation time. And I thought, what if 5% of that preparation time was spent doing scholarly activity? That equated to less than 2 hours. So what type of scholarly activity would you do while preparing for lectures? Well, presumably you're going to be interacting with the latest literature. You're going to be finding the information to explain the content that you have to deliver to the students. You might be looking for new information to incorporate into the lectures for the students. You might be looking at ways to teach this information. So you might be looking at the learning and teaching literature and working out how can I better develop these concepts in my students and trialling new activities. All of that is scholarly activity. The other question there is, so what I'm suggesting is that as part of that preparation time, you should be undertaking scholarly activity. This should be no additional or extra effort. I hope I've convinced you of that. The next question is about professional development. So professional development for academics can be scholarly activity. So you could come along and you could do the SALT training workshops as a beginning academic, and that would class as scholarly activity. But professional development might also be something like doing zero tolerance training. That is not scholarly activity. So on the Tertiary website, we've actually gone through and have annotated items that may be qualified as scholarly activity. Excuse me while I turn my light back on. I'm in the dark.
You are, Delma, you're in the dark. There we go.
Oh, there I am, tripping over my computer as well. So you will find activities on there that would classify as scholarly activity. However, if you have done a lot of teaching and learning, I wouldn't consider doing some training on how to use Turnitin scholarly activity for you if you've done it for many years. So keep in mind that just because it's labelled scholarly activity doesn't mean your supervisor is going to say, oh yeah, good girl, tick, and walk away from that. The other thing to consider is if you are a registered professional, so you're a nursing academic, you're required to maintain your registered nurse profile. As part of that, you have to do X number of hours of continuing professional development throughout the year. Most of that scholarly activity is likely to qualify as disciplinary activity. So you might learn about a new method of intubation and you're going to take that method of intubation and teach it to your students. So that would be professional development. Or you might do that would be disciplinary scholarly activity. Or you might do a session on better ways to facilitate trainee nurses on the ward, such as the one that was delivered yesterday on teaching student nurses ways to communicate with elderly people. That would class as learning and teaching scholarly activity. So because you are giving a guarantee to your professional body, I have done 20 hours of scholarly activity, we are going to say that will count as your disciplinary scholarly activity. And you'll be able to just indicate that registration in there and people will be happy. But as Bobby said, This is about developing as a professional. This is about being curious about what we do. This is about doing the best job for the students. So don't ever think I've done enough scholarly activity this year and I'm not going to do any more. And I'll just leave it at that because I'm starting to ramble.
Thank you, Delma. Josh, did you want to expand on anything there that Delma was just saying?
Oh, sorry, I wasn't listening to what Delma was saying. It's like, whoa, I just zoned out. No, Delma just touches on a couple of things. Thanks, Delma. Now let's look at, I'll just basically touch on a couple of, again, back to the logic. As a sessional staff member, I know there's been a couple of questions about sessional staff members and teaching scholars in general. But if we look at teaching scholars, you know, they are typically really committed to high quality education. So that's, you know, really pursuing that active program of research and scholarship and really making a concerted effort to enrich and energize the teaching and the student experience. And how do they do that? They do that by incorporating their own research, their own instructional activities. Now, I think either Bobby or Kate perhaps right in the beginning spoke about things that we did way back when. So I remember when I joined the university, and Bobby, we had those Thursday afternoon sessions, and that's the session where Raina either lost a shoe, had different shoes, had no shoes. But those were the sessions where we really got together as a group of people and spoke about our teaching and our research and how that's going to influence it. And that's what teaching scholars are all about. They're expected to promote deep approaches, you know, so really enthusiastic about, learning and teaching activities and learning through those activities to encourage our students to take to that next step. So what is it that we want our staff to do? Well, we're not going to hunt anyone down, or if they don't publish 26 papers and bring in $750,000 a year, that's not the purpose of teaching scholars. It's about reflecting on what we do, carefully reflecting on our practice, that joint practice that Tania mentioned up earlier on, as to, can we do it as a group? Of course we can. I think that's the whole purpose of the university. I think we've lost that ability to go into the staff room and sit and eat a banana and a piece of cake and just talk about, what just happened in the lecture 10, 20 minutes ago. And we should, we really need to focus on trying to get that back again, even if it's through a virtual, platform like this, which works okay. It's kind of difficult to share the cake and the pavlova, which we heard about earlier on today. I sort of smudge my camera if I tried to do that, because I know for a fact Tania wanted a piece. She said so on a text. But that's where we are with our academics. Yes, we've got the EBA, and yes, we've got those clear lines around them. And just looking at our documentation and policies, it says a teaching scholar academic focuses on teaching and scholarship in the academic discipline and beyond. So it is there, but we shouldn't be just constrained by that. We should read that and say, okay, well, yeah, this is a really good start. Now let's move on. Let's look at the practice that we're going to do. So even if you don't present an article or a publication or a journal presentation at a conference, if you go there, what benefit have you got out of it? Have you reflected carefully on it? Have you carefully examined what you can take out of it? And that's fine. As long as you can reflect on that as a sessional staff member, that's going to count a lot. And that's going to go into that system that Delma spoke about earlier on, that's going to come online in a little while. And we are going to slowly but surely work the university up to that point where it becomes second nature for us to record these things. Because at the end of the day, think about your career trajectory. So you are at point A at the moment, and you want to sort of develop and grow. There's different ways of growing. You might want to just grow in the experience that you give our students, and that's perfectly acceptable. Or you might want to grow in your research, or you might want to grow in terms of, you want to be a professor, well-known, internationally acclaimed, and that's also fine. And by recording and collecting all of these pieces along the way, putting it in your toolkit, that's the way that you're going to demonstrate that. Now, Celeste asked a question earlier on how do we demonstrate and how do we report back to the regulator about these things? Yes, they're a little bit fuzzy about that, but if we look at their requirement, they just say you have to be able to demonstrate that there is scholarly activity, all right, so scholarly activity over there, and scholarship of learning and teaching. So a little bit of discipline and all of that in there as well. And it's across the board. It's not just for permanent staff, it's for sessionals as well. So actually they did pick us up on the sessional staff part in 2017 and 2018. And that's why we've done quite a lot of work in the last year trying to really put this in very, very clear context. We've built those frameworks that Delma explained. We've put policies and procedures in place to assist our staff members along the way. But yet we still need much more work. So I think that in the next couple of months, with the workshops that Delma is doing, we are going to be able to really step up to that next level and be prepared so that when the regulator comes and says, okay, well, you show us your stuff, we will be in a position to show them our stuff. And all of that, it sort of adds up. If you go for that promotion, it goes into your promotion application. If you go for the Learning and Teaching Award, it goes into your Learning and Teaching Award. But more importantly, you shouldn't just do this for show, right? You shouldn't just do this for your award application. This should be entrenched in who you are, in how you approach learning and teaching, and how you approach our students to actually facilitate that amazing student experience. So, Celeste, I'm not sure if I've added any value, but certainly I've taken about 7 minutes of your time talking about these things, which I'm very, very passionate about. So, that's really that deep approaches that we have to, put out there. And now I'll stop.
Your passion always comes through, Josh. You are a passionate fellow. So there was another question that was posted a few little posts back from Tania, just in relation to how can we find mentors. Now, Delma, you did touch on that a little bit. Thank you for that. But I'm just going to impose on the great Bobby Harreveld. Bobby, what do you think of the theory behind teaching scholars engaging in mentors? Is it a good practice?
You mean engaging, sorry Celeste, I need a clarifying question.
Yeah.
Engaging as mentors or getting people to work with them as mentors?
Both. We say, yeah, go off and find yourself a mentor. Is it worthwhile?
Oh, yeah. Oh.
That was it? That's the answer? Yeah. So quick.
I think it depends on what you're looking for the mentor to do.
Yeah, what do you want from them?
Yeah. I think in this context, when we're talking about research, if you are launching and embarking on doing research, then having someone there that you can at least touch base with that has got research experience would be incredibly valuable.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Get through ethics, and that in itself is a good thing. So from that perspective, yeah.
So I mean, I guess there's a couple of different reasons to be asking for a mentor, or perhaps there's different things that mentors can contribute, and perhaps the answer is that we need to have mentors from a variety of different things all helping us. Perhaps that's the answer. One
thing that happens, I can see Delma's champing at the bit. One thing that does happen and has happened over the years, Celeste, with the SALT grants is when people were sitting on and Lisa's nodding her head, when people were sitting assessing the SALT grant applications, it was quite common to say, that it may help if the applicants seek a mentor. Now, that's as useful if you're new to the organisation as trying to, go out and find a blade of grass in the backyard, which blade of grass and what type. It just isn't logical or helpful. So therefore, at least from my experience, sometimes we've actually said, we suggest, based on your application, that you go and talk to X to mentor you through a revision or a resubmission of your SALT grant, in particular in these areas, bang, 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 bang. Now, sometimes for, your many friends who sit on the SALT grant committees, one gets dobbed in. And I think that that's really good. It's a good way of giving back. It's a way of getting out of the kitchen and meeting people. And it's also helpful on so many levels to be able to work with them on a project application. What's in it for me, I mean, not me personally, what's in it for a mentor in that sense is, well, if you lay the ground rules nicely and firmly, you get on the publications that are emerging, and you make damn sure there are publications or there are measurable outputs coming from that SALT grant application. And as Tania said, that's where the ethics stands a chance of getting through as well. So there's a very practical sense of mentoring that can happen, and that's just one instance of it. There's got to be a purpose to mentoring, because otherwise you sit on a phone or you sit on a Zoom these days and you twiddle your thumbs and talk about, you know, what Woolies is putting on special this week, but there's nothing really in it for anyone either. There has to be a clear purpose. I don't know what else you want me to say.
No, Kate wants to say something, and then Josh, did you want to say something as well? I'll go to Kate first.
Yeah, look, I've thought a lot about this. So I'm on the Run Mentoring Network and have a couple of mentees at other universities, and it takes a lot of work to be a good mentor and to develop a relationship. And Bobby's right, you have to have a really strong focus in terms of what that relationship is about. So my mentees are from different areas, so they're not necessarily, one is balanced. The other is much more teaching focused, and it really is just every month find something you're going to be better at, you know, and it's that we just have a conversation about that, and we in a few years haven't run out of stuff, but I think my advice would be to seek a mentor, but to do a bit of research into how you're going to do that mentoring and make sure you're engaging with someone who is prepared to learn how to be a good mentor at the same time, and then be willing. You know, I've got one that I think, I don't know that we're a really good match, so we might meet for another couple of terms, and I don't know that our values are consistent actually with regard to how we view career and so on. So I'm happy to continue to support her, and then probably say, look, I think that we've gone as far as we've come, but I think it's a valuable thing, but it's a mature, you have to be quite mature and do a lot of thought about it. I don't necessarily know that I do it perfectly, but again, reflective practitioner, sometimes, you know, crashing and burning is the best way to learn.
Thanks, Kate. Tracy, you've just raised your hand.
I just wanted to add to that conversation as a novice in this space and just entering into the Scholarship of Learning and Teaching, is that through my experience, not only do you have to shop around, but Kate, for example, has been a mentor for me for a particular project, and it was really significant not only shopping around to get the right person, and as Kate just elucidated in relation to not only personality but the skills that you're wanting, but you really need to develop up, well, I found that I really want to develop up, and Kate did it for us, a nice contract in relation to what is it that you're wanting from the mentor. So it's a very clear articulation and a mutual agreement between what this relationship is. Because sometimes I've found that you can get people that say, yeah, they'll be a mentor and they'll be on the publications, but they actually don't have the time or they don't have the particular skills that you're needing. So it's very, very important to shop around outside the school in the direct area that you're looking for, so that you get a wider knowledge and skill basis, and that increases your scholarship in itself.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But how does, I mean, I know how I would shop around. I've obviously been at university for quite some time. I'm a little noticeable about the place, even if people forget, you know, mistake me for Celeste. How would someone who's just joined the university, how would someone who's just starting out shop around to find someone? What if they're on a campus where there's only a few other people?
Yeah, thanks. Delma's got this one covered. Delma?
Come to the SALT training.
Oh, expand a little bit, Delma. Oh my goodness.
So at the SALT training, you're not going to listen to me for 2 days. I invite in the people that I consider, well, not that I consider, the people that at the university that are at the forefront of the Scholarship of Learning and Teaching: Bobby, Kate, Celeste, Tania, except she hasn't come yet, Lisa, I'm looking at who else is on screen, and they will help you during that time, and that gives you an invitation, not an invitation, it gives you a introduction to talk to them if you need to later on. But they're also part of a larger team of mentors. Helen Huntley invited a number of people who've been publishing in the SALT area to become mentors and to work with others. And there's a list of those people that's available, and they've written a short bio about themselves, what they research, what they're interested in, what their skills are in research, and how they're willing to help. So some people will say, come to me if you need help with statistics, whereas others will say, I'm happy to work with you to encourage you to write regularly, or I'm happy to review your work if you ever need somebody to do that. So all sorts of different ways that mentors can help.
Yeah, thanks, Delma. That's exactly what I was hoping you would say. We do have a list of people who've put their hand up to be mentors, and you can access that list by contacting Learning and Teaching Services or through Delma's SALT training. Josh, you had your hand up before in relation to the mentors. Did you want to say something? Oh, hang on, Josh.
Oh, okay.
Can't hear you. There we go.
Now better? Okay, cool. Probably it was better with the microphone muted. I think it's there's a level of self-awareness that's, you have to have that level where you can step back from yourself and say, okay, well, there I am, and these are the things that I really want to improve, and identify those, and then identify through different initiatives. At the university, we do have a couple of things happening. The Masterclass for Women in Academia, it's a really, really great initiative where we connect up, mentors from across, international mentors with staff members that really want to develop in that space. And the thing is, you have to challenge yourself. Don't choose somebody, like Kate said, don't choose somebody that perfectly aligns with you. You have to choose someone that's going to put you a little bit outside of your comfort zone, and that's going to every now and again say something that's uncomfortable and makes you think about and probably storm out of the room. I remember when I did my PhD with a certain Professor Harreveld a couple of years ago, I wanted to storm out of the room and throttle a couple of people multiple times, particularly towards the end when I wanted to throttle 4 people at the same time, but only could get my hands around one pair of necks. So yes, when you go in there with your eyes wide open. Tracy, you said that you wanted to shop around. Very, very important point. But shop around with an alternative view of if you go shopping for cars, you want something that's really reliable. But if you want to challenge yourself and grow along the way, go and shop for a Land Rover or something Italian that will leak oil and break down every now and again. Just so that you know how to get yourself going, next to the road when you break down and there's no one to pick you up again. Make sure that person is going to actually develop you and give you the skills that you need to get up again and just continue on that pathway. And there's ups and downs. You've all seen that little picture about, that's where you want to go, and the story of life is supposed to be a straight line. It's never a straight line. So thanks, Celeste.
Thanks, Josh. I'm not sure that your thoughts are a straight line. I don't think they ever have been, but anyway, that's hilarious. Okay, I'm coming to the end of the questions, and certainly I've covered off everything that I had noted for our panel members. Is there any other general questions that people would like to ask? Anything at all? Now's your chance, because it's kind of logically coming to a conclusion about the right time. So if there is any questions, now's the time. Please do ask. Would anyone like to make any further comments? Anything at all? Speak now, forever hold your peace. Just a reminder, while you're all thinking about what you want to ask and while you're madly typing into the chat, there's an evaluation for this session. The link has been posted in the chat. It's a little way up the list now, but go in there, please click on the evaluation and complete the evaluation for this particular session. I'd personally be very interested to hear how people have felt about this session, and whether or not you found it useful. It's been a very informal session, and that was quite deliberate, but would you have preferred a more structured session? Anything feedback-wise, please, that would be very, very helpful. We have done it deliberately very simple, and we called it training wheels to give that impression. So lowest common denominator is what we were after here for this session. Bobby's gone. I thought Bobby was saying I want to say something, and she was just waving to say that she's signing off. So anyone else got any questions, comments, anything? All right, gee, we're all very...
I'll just run an advertisement.
Go for it, Delma. Never leave an opportunity. Delma, never.
But 2 advertisements, and the first one is if you want to know anything about scholarly activity, please call or email me. I'm happy to answer questions one-on-one. But the other one is for the SALT training workshops that we have got organised already. And I'm thinking, Celeste, we also need to maybe January look at running a Zoom SALT training online.
What a lovely idea, Delma, something online.
Yes. Why didn't you think of it, Celeste? Celeste has been bugging me to do that from the beginning, and I said I was just so nervous about how it would work. We wanted to get it right face-to-face first. So we're having a session in Mackay in a couple of weeks. We're off to Bundaberg just before we all close up for Christmas. Then we'll go to Adelaide next year so that Perth, the Melbourne and Perth people can easily join us there, and Brisbane again in July, and hopefully the Sydney people can join us in Brisbane.
And for those people who are from other universities, nag your learning and teaching services and see if they're doing some training in relation to scholarship of learning and teaching, because if they're not, they really should be.
And just for that trip to Adelaide, just going to plug Adelaide, lovely wine, beautiful landscape. It's just amazing. That time of the year is good for swimming in the sea as well, you know. We might have to find time to actually do the workshop.
So obviously, Josh, you were the one who chose the March date for the Adelaide workshop. Okay, thanks, Delma. Good plug. Thank you to everybody. There's a question, Delma. Can casuals go? Can casuals you go to your training?
Absolutely. If you are in those centres and you want to come along, you're more than welcome.
And the other question is, do they have to be on a current contract with us to be able to go?
If you're in those centres and you'd like to come along when we're down there, give me an email, d.clifton@cqu.edu.au. I'll just put that in here now. And let's see if we've got a space.
Yeah, I think that's probably right, Delma, if there's room.
Yeah. Also, if you want to... That was my question. And I asked that because my current contract ends on Monday or Friday. And I don't know if I'll have any ongoing. I've been doing casual teaching for 3 terms now, and it just sort of comes and goes. So I'm officially unemployed as of Monday, but except for the marking. But so I don't know, if I'll have a contract next term or not. But my official casual contract runs till December 2020. If anyone wants to hire me, I'm available.
Good for you, Leanne. Another plug.
Plug for me.
Yeah, all right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks, everybody. Delma, can I get you to stop sharing your screen, and we'll, unless there's any other questions or anything, I think we'll probably call that an afternoon. Thank you very much. Just want to shout out to my colleagues for participating this afternoon. Tania, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know what an impost that was, and I do appreciate it. Thanks to Kate, Bobby. Thanks, Josh, for popping in, contributing your worth, and to Delma as well. But thank you to everybody who has contributed throughout this conference. It's been a marvellous conference, and thank you so much to everyone for this final session. So thank you everyone, and it's been great, and I really appreciate it. And unless people have got something else to say or add, then that's the end, and thank you very much.